relative to other countries than we legitimately are. But let's say we have had X amount of growth, though, especially since the 1970s. All growth has been had corresponding debt, so it's not been real growth. It's not been something that benefited most people. The growth has gone into a ever smaller slice of the population within the financial sector, which does not employ very many people. It doesn't produce anything, and has massively disproportionate income distribution there. So essentially, bottom line is it's benefited a very, very few at the expense of a very many.
Right. It benefits the few at the expense of very many, but it seems to me, right, that they are shutting down agricultural industries. They're shutting down manufacturing industries, and really, it's not something that's just seen here, which we have. We have hardly any of those industries, and those are getting less and less each year,
Mm-hmm.
especially as they buy up land, right? So ultimately, though, where we come with that end goal of as far as their financiers, but at the same time, if they take away all that industry, what do we what
Well,
what do we
they
really
don't
look
have
at?
any interest in countries. They exist above countries.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so the national economic logic doesn't matter to them. They got the rate of return overseas, and with the first Bretton Woods and the petrodollar, they could run massive. This country and the West to a degree could run massive trade deficits and massive government deficits and still sell the treasuries. Now, interesting thing here. Let's take a look at the Gulf states, for example. Uh, they're not being able to get any oil out. Let's just say they have a lot of U.S. treasuries. If they need money and they don't have any other way to get it, what happens if they start dumping those things? What does that do to the interest rates? Does that create a run on treasuries? This whole thing is really very fragile, and
yeah.
like I said, it's coming to an end.
Right, right. So, what role then does this war that we're losing play into this? And um, I guess they didn't plan on losing it, obviously, but what role is this playing?
Well, it's speeding it up, but it was you could look at it like this was inevitably going to happen. So Trump decided to roll the dice, along with acting as the useful goyim for the Israeli masters. There is an element here with the U.S. petrodollar and trade routes. So the U.S. We became the heirs of England, the ultimate sea people. You can control the trade routes that are on water. What can't you control? You can't control things that are on land routes. And the Iran's right exactly in the middle of it, and always has been. Iran, Persia. We've seen massive train routes running from China, from Russia, from Eastern Europe down through into Africa. These are not controllable through navies, and especially not controllable now because missiles are making the projection of naval power almost kind of obsolete. But embargo Iran? What are you going to embargo? The border with Russia? Yeah, good luck.
Right, right. Now let's pause though, because I do want to come back actually to the non-manufacturing finances, but it has to do with the trade routes, right? Is how do we go from in this? Where's the mindset? I guess as far as getting it out, getting something out of it, is we went from controlling the trade routes, the sea routes, right, to building railroads, which was a big deal, to pumping our economy with manufacturing industry and agricultural industry, which was all done by these merchants, these financiers in America. uh and then because they were cared, and so we have these financiers who were actually American.
Yep.
And then we have the who they saw an end goal, right? The end goal was because you need the manufacturing, you need the agriculture to sustain yourself as an independent country. But even without borders, without countries, and you control these sea routes, and you don't control, say, the railroads, but you try to, if you have nobody manufacturing anything, no money going back into an economy, and no agricultural industry, doesn't that lead to kind of a mass starvation in a way that ends up with them on the same footing?
Oh well, they don't think so. They think they being the financial elite think they're always on a different footing. The rest of us will own nothing and be happy as long as they keep getting a bigger and bigger share. But eventually, anything that's based on continuous growth, especially continuous exponential growth, isn't going to work. And that's pretty much where we have gotten to.
Right. So right. So you talked about embargoing, Iran, and you raised a good point, right? Is who like how what are you going to embargo, right? That railroad there, that border between Iran, say, and Russia, right? Because it just jumps up that far. Um, so the King of England, who has no power at all, uh, coming here to beg our Congress to wage war on Russia, which is not too hard when it's filled with Zionists and APAC, um, puppets, right? Uh, what was is this? What where are they going with this? As far as to extend the Iran and think that because we lost to Iran, we're going to go straight to the source of who's giving them weapons that are beating us?
Well, they want to stop BRICS. That was always the English concept: control the sea routes, and that they control the trade, and they basically become a tax on the trade. They're able to control currency. They're able to control the flow of goods. As soon as railroads started coming into being, and this was what well documented amongst the British elite, when the railroads went from narrow gauge to the much larger gauge tracks, that this was a huge threat. That's why they saw Russia as a threat and Germany as a threat, and they had to uh, do something about that, which resulted in a couple of world wars. Um, the sea people cannot control the land routes.
They can't.
Ultimately,
Right.
you can create wars. You can create. U.S. would like to have a Western friendly government in Iran so they can block these trade routes through there from BRICS. India, I forgot to mention India is a player in that too. It didn't happen. Didn't happen.
Right. They can't control these, so they've created an enemy that they're never going to beat because they can't control those.
No, and Russia's, I think, made it clear. Uh, no, I'll say Iran's not going to fold or buckle, but
Yeah.
even if it was, Russia and China aren't going to allow that to happen. We're in an absolute untenable position that was completely foreseeable. You still have people within the administration going on the talk shows saying, "Oh, just one more round of bombs, everything will turn out." Incredible that anybody could possibly believe this.
Right. Right. Um, but people are right, and a lot of people are just they're not approaching it from the logical standpoint. A lot of people I talk to are really approaching it from, say, the either the political view or the religious view. As far as the groups that just want to, I guess, kill us, right? And so I think that when they look at that and why people believe that is because people are so enamored by the political rhetoric or enamored by religious political rhetoric that it's like they don't ask the question why.
Yeah, or both. And I had to say, demographically, a lot of people my age and my background are really the problem. Tucker Carlson's had some short videos on where he was actually apologizing for his role in the election, considering the way this has turned out. But so many people, especially say they attend evangelical churches, are roughly my age. They've financially fared pretty well based on when they entered the workforce. They think anybody your age is basically lazy or stupid, and
But
it's a nice simple world, but it's not an accurate world.
Yeah, but there's a lot of irony in the and I think that this is where that mindset of people your age, the boomer
We're not
generation.
all like that too, and
I know, but
but
I'm not saying
yeah,
all, but I'm gonna say
yeah.
majority, right? Is that they approach the subject that people under them are dumber than them because they ask questions why, versus themselves who are arguably the most gullible and literally the dumbest, people that were easiest to manipulate around then and to buy into these narratives. And that's why you have the Lindsey Grahams being in office for 1,000 years, is because that generation who thinks everybody else is dumber and they're fearful of them, were easily manipulated.
Um, Coming of age and the time that I did, the everything did seem to work to a degree. You had a feeling it was getting worse, but it was still worked. And people, when they entered the workforce, they actually produced something. In my case, my whole life I produced complex, tangible products. How many people if you go around and poll people what they do for a living, have ever actually produced anything that somebody else wanted to buy willingly, not the government?
So let me counter this, right? How many of those people went into that manufacturing industry doing that, right, and feeling good about it, but also at the same time shooting themselves in the foot because they're financing their life, right? Which in a way, while they were financing their life and taking out loans for the
Hmm.
cars and buying into these wars that the politicians were selling, they were buying into that and not realizing, I guess, because they didn't think far enough ahead, that those manufacturing industries were dying as they were buying in.
They're not entirely related, but how did people become more willing to take on debt? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So that's the thing with debt. You can the person it's kind of like a drug transaction where the pusher, the provider of the credit, is like the drug pusher, but the person that accepts it enables the whole thing. They're both at fault.
No, I agree. I agree, but I think that that's the thing, though, right? Is that I think a lot of people, and this is it could be a wild claim we could talk about it. I think people underneath the y'all's generation, even my generation, they haven't had an opportunity to build anything with their hands. They haven't been led down that path.
No, they haven't. They haven't.
And I think that they haven't been led down that path by the people who worked in that path. They haven't shared that trade. I know, like you shared the trade of working on cars, and I've done the welding and other things like that. But a lot of people haven't had that knowledge bestowed upon them, where it was secret knowledge because these people were wanting to control these markets, these job markets, and the money, and then they just didn't pass down the knowledge, and it's like the oral history. It's had this generation been the oral history generation, nothing would have been passed down
No.
because they wanted to hold a monopoly on that idea. You're like, look at how many car machinists, like engine machinists, there are left, because nobody wanted to pass that knowledge down because it was like their bread and butter. But it's like at the end of the day, now that industry is dying out, and nobody can really pick it back up.
No, it's a very hard thing to restart. I remember when I was quite young, like 21, 22 years old, working in the shipyard. You'd have 10,000 people at a high point, all doing something, and it all came together. It all came together in a very complex product in a fairly compressed area. It's really an amazing thing to watch and to have been part of, because we don't even know how to do this anymore.
Right. But was that again, I defer, I think, to the path that people are taking. Like now, these there's kids with no work ethic, right? They don't want to do anything.
Yeah, and the counterpoint in their defense would be they haven't really had an opportunity to have a structured, meaningful economic role.
Yeah, like I think the American dream is a part of this, where it hasn't been a factor for them because nobody's after that majority boomer, but not all, right, have done that. And then it's like we don't have that same factors, you can see, people owning houses has gone down, people having kids has gone down, people staying in marriages has gone down, right? It's like the American dream that defined that is no longer here.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, but I go back to the idea. It's like, we have these industries, and they're I guess they're dying out anyway. Um, to get back on track, right? Uh,
Yeah. Sorry.
as far as the picture of Iran, right? When that ends, if it ends, what's next is for America, as far as now, how do we rebuild? How do we install all that? Because this is kind of that symbol that we have reached for the stars in this war. We've reached for that final goal, and we have failed. We talk about the Middle East. Essentially Israel will be no longer Israel, but for us, we have devoured ourselves for that goal, and we've missed it. So where do we go?
Well, I'm going to say something that probably almost no pundit would agree with. We would be better off if we lose the petrodollar, which would make capital would have to take a big haircut if that happened. But we would be in a position where we would have to produce things again.
Right.
We would have to develop industry, and until we get to the point where we have to, we won't.
Right. We have to, but when we get to that point,
We get to the point when we lose the petrodollar, and you can't sell the treasuries without jacking the interest rate up. So the demands lower, interest rates higher. That's the way it works. And at that point, you really quickly get to the point where you have to start living within your means. You can't run the trade deficits. You can't run the government deficits. Everything resets, and you have to start producing things. Russia, for example, we're going to sanction them. They can't do anything. Well, what did they start doing? They started producing things again and started being able to engineer things. They've improved as a result of that in every way possible. Why'd Iran shock everybody in this war? Well, it's because they couldn't buy stuff. They had to learn how to make it. They had to learn how to design it. They had to be innovative. They had to use their population for something other than burger flippers.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal. I think that what Russia and Iran they have done, even China, right, is that they've seen the foreseeable future, right? They saw how this would play out in the way that, say, Israel was acting in the Middle East, and how America was coming in as the watchdogs. And they recognize that something has to start to be done to build up these weaponry, to build up a defense that could counter these, whatever America and Israel have, because eventually it's going to come to their doorstep.
Well, Iran's been planning this for 30 years, and they don't have any, by the way, they don't have an offensive capability. They're not going to invade anybody. But with relatively limited resources, they have some good engineering schools. They produced engineers, not sociologists or psychologists. They produced engineers and scientists. With a very basic missile program that was almost 1950s like. They've done everything from that. They not only produce things that work, they do it quickly. They do it at low cost. They have good ability to replenish what they use, and we don't.
Yeah, I think low cost is the key, though, right? They don't have the rent seekers like Raytheon, who want to pillage the government. And so, you've got these low cost, weapons that are doing a great deal of damage, and they can be easily replenished. Versus America, which is like it's millions of dollars for one thing.
Yeah.
And it's that you can't reproduce it that quickly because it costs so much.
Missiles are inexpensive, and they're less expensive than dramatically so than what's used to try to shoot them down. And we've seen that. They say that the Shahed drone is 20,000 to 50,000, and to produce it here would be, but they in Iran, they're saying they produce them from $2,000 to $5,000 when you consider exchange rate and purchasing power parity. Um, our system for our aerospace and defense industry is not designed to produce good weapons so much as it is, or cheap weapons as it is to transfer as much money as possible into the industry.
Right, and I think that's kind of our big deal, our big problem. And again, that goes back to it's like nothing's left for younger generations growing up. Is that everything's been made to where they've had the mindset of pillage, pillage, pillage. It's like everything's inefficient because they're trying to pillage everything that they can from these things. It doesn't matter what industry it is; you're trying to get as much money from it as you can.
All right, yeah, yeah. No,
Uh,
it's return on capital. Every decision that's I think, ever been made in the history of the country, you can contest this if you want. I might possibly be wrong, but it's always made on the interest of capital.
yeah, made on the interest of capital, but it's the not just but when it started though, it wasn't the how much you pillage, it's how much you give back as well.
Hmm.
Right. If you take our merchants originally, they made a lot of money. Sure, they created a lot of wealth, but they created a lot of industry in our country. They
They
created,
did. Yeah.
and that's not in one section of the country, that was in both. And they gave back and poured into this country. A lot of things we have was because they poured into it. But again, that post 1945 world, um,
The
it
post
was
1945 world was all take, no
it
give.
was all take and no give back, and it was like, and everybody was like, they kind of like Schmeagol with the ring and Lord of the Rings, right? It's like this is my
Yes,
precious,
precious,
right?
precious.
Yeah, and again that kind of goes to um I guess our mindset, but it's like we even go back to why the wars are fought in the first place. We're fighting wars to pillage. We've done pillaging ourselves, so we've got to pillage everybody else. To the point where you have like Don Jr. and stuff creating, having drone companies that are pillaging too.
Yeah, that's we'll know more about who made how much money off these most recent wars at some point, hopefully. But just what I think I've seen to this point is really pretty disgusting.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have a guy in office going senile, creating a whole new position of that, was supposed to extend beyond the boundaries of governments, the Board of Peace, and then you have all of his sons, essentially building weaponry to fund these, to participate. It is disgusting. It's brought a whole new aspect to war as a racket. I think even Butler Smedley would be kind of baffled.
Oh, yeah, this is taking it to a new level, and it's right out in the open. It's in your face. We'll lie to you, and if you don't buy our lies, we don't really care.
Right, and they don't. That's the point, though. They don't care. They don't care about what's next for anybody. They just care about what's for them, which makes the untimeliness of an assassination attempt a little odd, right?
Yeah, well, there's some weird stuff about that. One of the pictures of this guy, I think there's several pictures, but one that I saw is he's in an IDF sweatshirt. Why
Really?
somebody living in California got an IDF sweatshirt? I mean, just tell me. Maybe that could happen. Uh, I doubt if they sell them online. Seems a little strange.
Yeah, right. But that's the point, though. I go back to it was an interview with Danny Jones and Kurt Metzger, and they were saying it's essentially that nobody's buying these anymore, right? We're not buying the fact that this was just a college kid from California polarized by the political narrative to show up at a hotel.
Run blindly through an entrance on the wrong floor. In all the untrue things that the government's telling me recently, I don't know if that's high on my list of things to worry about, but
But then I saw
pretty
this
suspicious to me.
is the far fetched one is I guess um, showing the lack of security at other places that aren't, that are, I guess, for the other forces that are trying to stop Trump from building the ballroom, right, is an excuse for that as well. But also, it's like, what are we doing this? If the guy has the IDF sweatshirt, it's like, is now we have Mossad trying to? Are they tired of Trump? Has
No,
Trump
they
been,
weren't. They weren't trying to kill anybody. If you had an actual organized attempt at an assassination that could have happened, it wouldn't have looked like that. Uh, this looked to me to be something that is more likely to have intent to be a media event than it was an actual assassination attempt.
Yeah, well, that's the point, though. It's just kind of I guess they got a gullible guy to go in there and make a news story.
It's hard, I don't really know, and it could even be a real assassination attempt. But good grief, if it was, they need to stop saying this guy's intelligent. It's one of the dumbest things that you could have planned.
Yeah, because he didn't even get that far, right?
It was really not even in the right place.
Yeah. So, um, hold on. Yeah, right. It's like it was the weakest, but that's the point, though. What's the point of this? What was the point of the assassination attempt? Why
Oh,
was
I
it?
don't. Let's say it was a false flag. It would be
I'm not even.
a diversion from a lot of other things that aren't going particularly well. What narrative change or a way to rally the base with the far left, the far left, the far left. Yeah, let me just throw a thought in here too for a minute. The if you trace back the origins of the neoconservative right and the uh, neoliberal left, the new left of the '60s, both these groups are derived out of the literally out of the American Communist Party, which derived out of the Jewish immigrants to New York and other eastern cities around 1900. These people have they're different branches of the same poisonous tree.
Yeah, yeah, right. And they've gone in. I think people. I guess like when this is what bugs me when people buy the standard historical narrative is like they buy a standard historical narrative that was majority a lie, but it was manipulated on top of the lie to produce, an outcome that was going to support them and all their shenanigans. Right.
Yeah, the neoconservatives, the core neoconservatives were one-time Trotskyites, and they didn't change that much. They went from being Marxists to being Zionists. It's not really all that different.
Yeah. I guess it's the why has it taken people so long to even like consider that now?
Well, because they being one side or the other in the what we perceive to be a left-right conflict have controlled the media, and also and the big one, you just got to come out and say it, is because these are these are at their core Jewish movements. The Jewish interests, Jewish elites own the press. They were able to control what people heard, and coming out of World War II, the charge of anti-Semitism was enough to shut anybody up. And they did, and it's worked. It's worked for a very long time. They've managed to control, own the country. Now I think people need to ask, what is the role of Israel? What's the role of Zionist elite Jews finance in running the country? And the honest answer is it's way, way, way disproportional to what it should be based on the population. And I'm being nice there. I could say that a lot worse.
Right. But so did they? Okay. did they just capitalize on a moment in history and a population that was they understood coming out of a war was not going to ask the question of why? That they were just too hopped up on patriotic hormones that they just were going to roll with America regardless, and that was like their opportunity to seize the moment.
Well, I think both. They were going to roll with America. They had invested a lot of time and effort into controlling the American Protestant church, the evangelical churches. Coming out of World War II, they amped that up through several people, starting with Arnold and Billy Graham and Falwell and Roberts. He was a little different, but they were able to control the American churches and their and most of the elected officials. Kennedy bucked the trend, and I'm not saying there are a lot of people that wanted to kill Kennedy, but of course he wound up not being able to deal with Israel the way he intended to because he was dead.
Yeah, but again, like that's my thing though too. You look at like the evangelicals, right? You even look at like Falwell, right? That whole story of his life was produced.
Yeah, you see that over and over too. Yeah.
There was no organic, Christian outflowing of Christ, like, oh, the conversion story. It was like a drunkard father who then all of a sudden became a Christian, but didn't practice or whatever, right? And however that story went, it's like then you have Falwell. It's like then you have all of a sudden a small, Baptist church there, and then it went to Brutal Liberty.
Yeah, exactly. The backstories on a lot of these individuals and groups are really don't tell anything good. You do wonder, how did they become so powerful so quickly? Where'd the money flow? The people certainly aren't particularly qualified, and Candace Owens' podcast bring that up heavily in some of the Calvary Chapel type groups today, where you have someone who was some sort of criminal, and the next thing you know, they're running a church, and people look to them as spiritual mentors. What?
Yeah, and then you say, well, what about this? And it's all his excuses. Oh, well, Jesus forgives, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what?
It doesn't mean you actually know anything.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I guess when it comes down to it, right? Because it's like these as they took over those things, it's like then they can started controlling these narratives and started again. You saw a lot of people during that time stop asking questions, just become yes man, like absolutely right. We'll fall into line, like don't buck authority. Like the during COVID, you saw the whole Romans 11 or whatever.
Yeah, Romans 13. Yeah.
Romans 13, it was like they were like, this is what this says. And a lot of that was left over from that narrative because you saw a lot of those guys from that time trying to pass that on, try as like, oh, this is to honor the government. You gotta, it's only people that were from there still trying to pass it on and can't figure out why nobody's buying it.
Yeah, well, in evangelical churches, there was always a style of argumentation that it's a little bit hard to explain without living in it. But for the people that are in the system, it is very difficult to for them to question anything because of what socially the way they will be treated.
Yeah, but how'd they get? I guess that what's weird to me is that like the social treatment is are we really were we that and kind of and stuck into community thought that it's like they were just that worried, right? If they said, hey, wait a minute, let's challenge this.
Well, if you look at some of the things, especially about the Judeo-centric eschatology, dispensationalism, they really are just on the surface sounds kind of nuts, and they have to keep that locked down tightly so people don't think too much about it because it
Yeah,
doesn't hold up to the history of it. If nothing else, doesn't hold up to a lot of scrutiny.
right. And but eschatology in general, eschatology just sounds dumb. Like you look at it and you listen to somebody talk about the end times, you go, just stop. Like that doesn't make sense. Just knock that off, right? But that's
Yeah,
the
let's
point.
knock that off.
Well, it's like we're building up to that, right? It's like the whole war that we're looking at in the Middle East was to play out eschatology, and it wasn't to bring about an organic returning and this and that. Everything that they have been involved with from the Revolutionary War till now has been trying to bring about this end times that's not going to happen. And I'm okay with saying that it's not going to happen, right? It's just
No,
not.
no.
And they could stomp their feet and they could say Revelation says this, this, and this, and it's just at the end of the day, it's like seven tries later hasn't happened, and and that's the whole point here is like they've infiltrated, created yes men, created people that aren't going to challenge anything, all the way so that the last time that they try this, it fails, and then an entire system's broken and shattered because you pulled the veil out. Right.
Yeah,
You can't say next time because who's next time?
right.
The old
That's whenever you have a failed prophecy of some sort. The answer is, oh, I miscalculated something. It's going to happen. Or oh wait, no, next time, next time. You just keep pushing it.
right.
And I mean, also, I'll point out here the whole history of Christendom up until the times of the Puritans were they were amillennialists. You didn't have this. People that were doing would do these things were basically Messianic Jews, and they were considered revolutionaries. This is something that we came about significantly after the Reformation. It's a new thing, fairly new thing, anyway.
Right, but that's the irony of the situation, right? Next, okay, and I'm going to say what next is. Next is you're attacking the home of the Orthodox Christian Church, the Eastern Orth or whatever, the Russian
Yeah,
Orthodox Church.
yeah,
You're
right, right.
going to the people who have claimed since Catherine the Great that they are the keepers of orthodoxy, right? They
Yeah,
are the third Rome and no more, right? And it's like so now you go from attacking these people in the Middle East, and then you're fighting against the Orthodox Church,
yeah. That's
and
literally
that's
what
that's
they'd be
supposed to
doing.
bring
Yeah,
about the end time.
yeah,
That's ridiculous.
yeah. It is.
Right,
Yeah,
but we've played from this point forward. We've tried to play out this narrative, and the again, I go back. I hate to say this, but the generation that bought into the eschatology the most and the worst, right? It's like people. It's look where we got ourselves, or got ourselves.
yeah. People in churches need to wake up and question some things. Yeah, I teach a study group on that. Uh, Not a lot of interest in it. Not a lot of interest in it.
Yeah, because they don't want history, because the history shatters the veil,
It
right?
makes you feel uncomfortable about yourself. You don't know things that you thought you knew.
Right, and knowledge is uncomfortable, and that's always the thing of why people generally end up by themselves when they're intellectually
Yeah.
um, above everybody else, right? Um, yeah, right. So we look at that in eschatology, and I guess hold on, where are we going to go from here? Kind of been all over the place, but we've been all right. We've been all
We've
right.
been all over the place. Sorry if I took you in tangents.
That's okay. We're rolling the tangents today. Let's bring it back to Iran because I think it's ultimately where we want this conversation to go. We've attacked it from all angles in one podcast, so that's pretty cool. Right, with the Strait of Hormuz still closed, right, and we're still kind of locked into this now an economic kind of argument or battle. Uh, where are we getting with that? You talked about the oil and ultimately the petrodollar either has to fail or they have to somehow convince the people we're at war with to buy back into the petrodollar because I know they're moving back to the yuan,
That's
right?
not happening. That's not happening.
It's not happening.
Um,
But anyway, but that's the point. Like, so we're in this economic battle now. Where how do we manipulate, or how does this get? Where does this end up? In which country is this going to benefit? And will at some point we have to address the petrodollar as the elephant in the room?
oh, it's the petrodollar is going to be addressed. This is the speeding its demise, and it might end it, abruptly. So the Gulf client states are going to wind up not existing. Uh, you have Iran's definitely going to be a regional power. A lot of people think Israel would be a regional power. The U.S. is going to be out. We're not going to go back and rebuild those bases. We're done. Uh, will Israel be a regional power? I'm not so sure. I think Israel has a lot of things working against it, no matter how much money is pumped in there from the U.S. Or other international sources. It has a small population. Their military is not proven to be very effective at doing anything other than killing women and children and civilians.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I think the regional power. I think where they're deriving that is they aren't taking into the idea that America funds their entire lifestyle.
yeah.
Right. So I think that when they talk about that, they assume that Israel is its own thing and produces enough to be independent without us. Right. And I don't think they could even defend themselves long enough without our
Well,
taxpaying.
that was Netanyahu's vision, but I don't see it happening. Um, Iran pounded them, and without our help, it would have been. It's bad enough with their help, but without our help, it would have been way worse.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think too, you're starting to see, like even in our people running for office now that's kind of a talking point that they're having is no more dollars for Israel, right?
we
Um,
need to have more people with that talking point.
yeah, and I think the talking point though has to be honest, right? It can't be like the whole Obama thing where try not to give money to Israel while giving money to Israel,
Right?
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was
That's
which was
exactly
the
what
whole
that
the,
was.
the laughable joke for him,
Yeah.
next to giving weapons to quote unquote rebels. But I think that there's a movement away from Israel. And I think eventually Israel will face the hard line of America at some point, especially if younger people or want to get into politics. I think that if not now, I think within the next 10, maybe 15 years, that'll be something they have to cross. The idea that America's given up on them.
That will happen when people will look at the history of Israel, especially the history of Zionism in the United States since 1900, and realize everything that it's done.
Right. But okay, so how do you move forward with that, right? So if we give up on Israel, you have to acknowledge the Zionism. You have to acknowledge that a lot of the hell on earth has been led by specifically the Ashkenazi Jews, right? We can, people can say the other groups weren't involved, and that's fine. I'll take that argument, right? How do you go about eventually telling this to these group of people, right? Like say the ones that run academic thought and get around the idea that they're going to come at you with the oh, you're anti-Semitic, even though it's like you're just pointing out the truth, right? How do you say truth and then or I guess not avoid it, but it's like point out, it's like, hey, you're just stupid, right?
You have to have enough people that are not afraid of the consequences.
Like for me, I've been called a lot of things, and I gladly be called that because it's like if I'm going to tell you the truth, it's like you can call me whatever name, but you're never going to be truth with the name,
Yeah.
right?
And it comes down to the character. You have to have enough people that are not slave to their car payment or to having people like them. I just say, I'm my loyalty is to God and my loyalty is to the truth, and I'm going to tell the truth no matter what happens. That's a Christian concept. That's not that's a core Christian concept throughout the history of Christianity.
Yeah, I think, and
You do what's right. You speak the truth no matter what.
no matter what, right? It's like you're gonna take flack, and you got to be okay with it. I think a good point though is that you got to have that mindset But you just there's so much involved with that. That's I
Well,
guess what
something you've mentioned before is Bonhoeffer's cheap grace and costly grace. The unfortunate fact is that if someone's weak and they're ignorant, that's not going to work out well.
yeah, and that's and again, but then you look at so costly grace has become cheaper than cheap grace, right? So I watched someone post the other day, and we probably know you know who this is talking about this idea of costly grace and saying not cheap, but at the same time they're spouting out cheap grace stuff on
They
a
are.
daily
Yeah.
basis, and it's like you cannot people that don't even get close to the cost of grace, right? Are the cheapest of all while claiming they're they're paying the cost.
Hmm.
Right, and so there's no examples anymore of someone, paying that cost in a way, and, they've even tied Jesus to Yahweh, which then it kinda makes the groups inseparable.
Yeah.
Um, so, it's interesting. I think that narratives are changing. I think that people should are less inclined. I think when it comes to Israel, that what they did and how they messed this up, especially with Trump, is that getting Trump to leave his voter base has opened the door to the murder of that Israel has done across the world. I think that they really this is something they should have seen happen if they were going to get Trump to leave his voter base. That voter base, which is largely on the rise of intellectual, enlightenment period,
Yeah.
right? Minus the ones that they find these dumb people and then put MAGA hats on them and then they say the stupidest things in the world, right? Um, it's like the actual voter base that wanted this have then said, well, let's open the door to why someone's left their voter base, right? And Israel has not foreseen that, or if they did, they figured there wouldn't be enough of us to challenge that, right?
No, they didn't understand it. The one thing I observed about the thinking of the Jewish elite, Zionist Israel, they think strategically, but they don't think deeply. They don't appreciate subtleties, like the foot's on the gas or the foot's on the brake. It's never between the two, and they don't really think ahead. They're put simply, they're not that based on their actions. They're not that smart.
Yeah, they definitely aren't. And I think that um, Tucker had that interview and we talked about it, is that they are blindly prideful,
Yeah,
right? And they don't even ask questions of who's over them, right? They see Netanyahu, and whether or not they like Netanyahu, they're still, as long as the flag of Israel's there, but they don't see beyond the what the flag's covering,
yeah.
right? So yeah, I think we will roll with that today.
Okay.
Next week we are approaching the. We will talk about the neoconservatives because we must talk about the neoconservatives. So if you stuck with us through this, pulling on the threads and the rabbit holes and coming back to kind of, it had a central point, but we've gone through kind of all these options that we could approach this from. Next week we are going to talk about the neoconservatives. We are going to talk about where your historical narrative came from, where they came from, and briefly mentioned here. And so I ask that you stick with us. We will be back next week. I promise you. We took a hiatus, and that hiatus was well worth it because I was able to get a chapter or two done of my dissertation, which is going to be something y'all are going to want to read. But I also was able to start building this company up and started making merch and things like that, and that'll be up on a website here shortly. So we appreciate you sticking with us. We appreciate you being here, keeping our lights on, whether or not you give money to the cause. Just tuning in is enough, and is enough to be thankful for in itself. So we ask that if you want to interact, leave comments. Share the video, like the video, subscribe to our page, right? And again, we're gonna have merchandise. Sorry, here we got one, just kind of a start here. So we appreciate that, and thank you for tuning in to the Dissenting Goyim Show, brought to you by the Dissenting Goyim Media Group. Thank you.